He was late, and Bulma had just finished tucking an already asleep Trunks into bed. She stood back and smiled as she watched her little boy sleep, wondering what his young mind was dreaming about. Judging from the smile formed on his face, it had to be good. She turned and left the room, quietly closing the door behind her before she proceeded back to her bedroom. After changing and brushing her teeth, Bulma climbed into bed, careful not to disturb Vegeta, who was already asleep. She laughed silently to herself as she studied him. He had turned onto his stomach, his arms tucked under the pillow. His face was completely relaxed, except for the little smile on his lips, one that resembled the one she'd seen on Trunks' face a few minutes before. This time, Bulma didn't have to wonder what he was dreaming about. He was dreaming about the battle he'd have with Goku one day. And from that smile, he was winning. Bulma turned off the light and turned onto her side, watching Vegeta. She wondered if he really loved her. He never seemed to show much affection, though she didn't really expect it from him. On the other hand, he was still here with her and Trunks. So that had to mean he cared about them to a certain extent. Right? She had noticed that he'd been paying more attention to Trunks in the last few months, however, and he was more tolerant of his crazy antics. Vegeta also spent more time with her, even if that time was just spent bickering with her about how bad her cooking was. But still, it was something. She smiled and closed her eyes, satisfied about her assumption about Vegeta. He cared. The next day, Trunks ran into the room. "Wake up, Daddy," he cried as he jumped onto the bed. "It's already 7 o'clock, I wanna get started with the training session." Trunks went on as he jumped on the bed. Vegeta slowly opened his eyes, an annoyed expression forming onto his face. "Go away," he told Trunks as he turned away from him. Trunks stopped jumping and looked down at his dad. "Mom," he whined. "He promised." Bulma got up and yawned, pulling on her robe as she left the room to start breakfast. "Give him a minute to wake up." Trunks looked disappointed and flopped down onto the bed. After a minute he turned back to his dad and smiled. "Are you awake yet?" he asked. "No," Vegeta replied. "Are so?" Trunks protested as he began to poke Vegeta in the arm continuously. "Come on. Train me." Vegeta muttered something under his breath and grabbed a pillow, hitting Trunks with it and sending the child flying off the bed. "There," Vegeta mumbled, his eyes never opening. "That was lesson 1. Always be wary of pillows, they pack a punch." Trunks got up and laughed as he picked up the pillow and jumped back onto the bed. He started jumping on the bed again and Vegeta rolled onto his back and glared at Trunks in annoyance. Trunks saw the look and laughed, jumping one last time, then landing on Vegeta's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Trunks chuckled. "There's a lesson for you, Daddy," he smiled. "Beware of the hyper kid that wants to drain." Vegeta pushed Trunks off him and sat up, mumbling the whole time. "I'm up, now go away," he said, looking back at Trunks. Trunks shouted happily and ran out of the room to get some breakfast before the training began. Trunks was almost finished eating when Vegeta came down, dressed and ready to go. Trunks shoveled the remaining food into his mouth so he could start training. "Trunks!" Bulma shouted. "Chew! Chew!" Trunks was startled by his mother's sudden outburst and started choking. Bulma shrieked and ran over to Trunks, trying to dislodge the food by hitting him on the back, with no luck. "Help!" Bulma screamed at Vegeta, who was standing calmly in the doorway. She stood back as he walked over and hit Trunks in the back once, sending Trunks' face flying into the bowl of cereal in front of him. After a moment, Trunks sat up, cereal and milk all over his face. "Daddy!" he cried. "Vegeta!" Bulma shouted. "Was that necessary?" Vegeta smirked. "He's not choking anymore, is he?" Bulma sighed. "No, thanks for your help." Trunks wasn't as forgiving. "You got food all over me," he cried in annoyance. Vegeta leaned on the table and grinned at Trunks. "That was for bothering me this morning." Trunks settled back into his chair, arms folded, mumbling about the whole situation. "Oh, Don't worry about it, Trunks. You'll get your father back during your training session today, Bulma said as she wiped Trunks' face clean. Yeah, Trunks said happily. Vegeta snorted. Not likely. Bulma walked outside as Vegeta and Trunks strained. Trunks, she called. I'm sorry, but we have to go to a doctor appointment. I completely forgot. Trunks and Vegeta stopped. But Mom, Trunks protested. I don't want to. Too bad, Bulma said as she walked over to him. We have to go, now. Trunks looked up at Vegeta with an expression on his face that practically screamed for help. What's he have to go to the doctor for, woman? He's not sick. Bulma looked over at Vegeta. He's got to get a flu shot. Unlike you, he's half human and is vulnerable to things that you aren't. Trunks' face suddenly went pale. S-shot. He screamed. No. I won't go. Vegeta started flying back to Bulma. What's the big deal, kid? It's a blasted shot. It doesn't even hurt. Trunks didn't answer. Instead, he continued to struggle until the two reached the car where Bulma was waiting. Vegeta threw Trunks into the car. You go get that shot, or I'll never train you again, Vegeta threatened. Trunks sat still and mumbled under his breath. Fine. But I'm mad at you now. He finally shouted back at Vegeta. Like I care, Vegeta said as he closed the car door and watched them drive off. After about 2 hours, Vegeta began to wonder what was taking Bulma and Trunks so long. That brat is probably putting up a fight. Vegeta grinned a bit at the thought. Vegeta? He heard a familiar voice call from outside. Vegeta got up and walked outside. Kakaroto, he said in surprise. Goku was standing there, looking like something was terribly wrong. What do you want? Vegeta snapped. Bulma and Trunks are being held captive up in the mountains by an extremely powerful man that looks exactly like you. I read his power level and he's way too powerful for me to take on alone. If you want to get Bulma and Trunks back, we're going to have to fight together. Vegeta was shocked, though he didn't let it show, keeping the same grim expression that he always has on his face. He thought for a moment. Fine, he finally said. I was bored anyway. The two made their way to the mountains where Goku led Vegeta to the spot he'd seen the man earlier. Goku slowly pushed open the door leading to where Bulma and Trunks should have been, but no one was there. They were here last time, Goku said in confusion. Looking for someone? A voice behind them said. Vegeta and Goku spun around. Vegeta's eyes widened. Kakaroto was right. This man looked just like him, except for his clothes weren't the same color. While Vegeta's armor was blue and white, this man's armor was black and yellow. Where's Bulma and Trunks? Vegeta demanded. Right here, the man said as he walked to a few boulders, pulling Bulma and Trunks out from behind them. Trunks had a few cuts and bruises but for the most part, looked fine, same with Bulma. If you hadn't made me go for that shot, we wouldn't be here right now, Trunks said grimly. Oh shut up, brat, Vegeta growled. If you weren't half human, you wouldn't have had to go at all. But that's not my fault, he shot back. Trunks and Vegeta both looked over at Bulma. Well, excuse me for being human, she cried. Goku and the man looked surprised and confused by the sudden family squabble. Are you a Saiyajin? Goku asked. The man scoffed. Of course not. Being part of such a weak race would be embarrassing. Vegeta's blood boiled. Who are you then? He demanded. My name is Vegito. I happen to be the last of a race that was all but wiped out by a virus. A virus that was released on my planet by a Saiyajin. Your father, Vegeta? My father, Vegeta repeated. How did you survive? Vegeta glared at Vegeta. I escaped the planet before the virus could affect me. The others weren't so lucky. Vegeta scoffed and folded his arms. So you ran? Vegeta growled. Not by my choice. I'd come to seek revenge on your father, only to learn that his son and one other Saiyajin were the only survivors of the race. He glanced at Goku. I suppose that you that other Saiyajin. In any case, I'm seeking revenge through you, Vegeta. I plan to kill this woman and your little brat, and then move on to you. Vegeta's temper flared. He tried thinking of how he could get to Trunks and Bulma before Vegeta had a chance to kill them. The distance between them was great, and he didn't want to risk it. Goku tapped him on the shoulder, motioning to his forehead. Vegeta nodded, understanding what he meant. A second later, Goku used his instant transmission to get to Vegeta, quickly grabbing Trunks and Bulma before Vegeta had time to react, then transported them back to Vegeta. What? Vegeta growled. No matter, I'll kill them after I've finished with you two. Vegeta and Goku turned Super Saiyajin and Vegeta led the attack. The two surrounded Vegeta, attacking at top speed. After taking a few hits, most of which only caused small cuts, Vegeta lashed out, punching Goku, causing him to slam into a few boulders about 20 yards away, and grabbing Vegeta, both of which had been invisible to the naked eye. Vegeta gasped in surprise as Vegeta tightened his grip on him, his arms pinned to his sides. Vegeta chuckled. Is that all you've got? Vegeta angrily exploded with energy and twisted away from Vegeta, turning to hit him with a massive ki attack at point-blank range. There was a bright flash of light and a huge explosion that propelled Bulma into the air. Fortunately, Trunks grabbed her hands and lowered her to the ground safely. After the light died down, Vegeta struggled to see through the smoke the attack caused. Goku, who was just now recovering from the punch he'd received, suddenly sensed Vegeta's ki, as did Vegeta. Watch out, he called to Vegeta. But it was too late. Vegeta exploded out of the smoke only inches from Vegeta, striking him across the face with all his power, sending Vegeta hurtling into the side of a cliff, completely disappearing into the solid rock. Bulma, Trunks and Goku looked at the cliff side that Vegeta had disappeared into, hoping he'd emerge. But there were no signs of him. His ki couldn't even be felt. Vegeta laughed as he saw the look on everyone's face turn grim. Don't be so sad, he said to them. You'll join him soon enough. He turned and looked at Trunks and Bulma. Trunks went Super Saiyajin and flew toward the smirking Vegeta, who was ready to strike the young boy down. No, don't, Trunks, Bulma yelled, trying to stop the boy with no prevail. Goku quickly made his way to Trunks and grabbed him, causing Vegeta's potentially deadly attack to miss him by mere inches. Be foolish, Trunks, Goku told him, trying to calm the enraged boy. You saw what he did to Vegeta? He'll do the same to you. Trunks screamed in rage. No. He killed my dad. I'll kill him. Suddenly, Vegeta lunged forward, sending a huge ki attack toward them. Goku had little time to react, just barely avoiding the attack as he tossed Trunks back to Bulma. Vegeta went after Goku. The two sent devastating attacks at one another, but still, Vegeta's power was too much for Goku, and he soon threw the badly hurt Saiyajin to the ground, pinning him down by putting his foot on Goku's chest. Vegeta laughed and applied more agonizing pressure to Goku's chest. I'll spare you for the moment, he said, looking toward Trunks and Bulma. I'll kill these two first. I'm sure they're eager to be with Vegeta again. Goku struggled to get up as Vegeta pointed his palm at his victims and fired a huge attack at them. Bulma screamed and scooped Trunks up in her arms, kneeling down to the ground in an attempt to protect him. Suddenly, at the last moment, a streak of lightning went by, picking Bulma and Trunks up as it passed by. The blast hit and exploded, missing its target. Vegeta looked around, trying to figure out what happened. Then, his eyes settled on Vegeta. He was holding Bulma and Trunks, glaring at Vegeta. He had blood flowing down the side of his face from a serious wound caused from Vegeta's last attack on him. No one tries to kill my brat and his mother and lives, he said coldly. and no one kills Kakaroto but me. Vegeta laughed and looked at the horribly wounded Vegeta. And how do you expect to kill me? It looks as if you can barely stand. Vegeta smirked as he put Bulma and Trunks down. His power level began to rise slowly at first, then exploded to levels he'd never before reached. Vegeta looked surprised and finally took his foot off Goku, who rolled to the side to get out of the way. Vegeta lunged forward and buried his fist into Vegeto's stomach, then spun around and kicked him in the ribs. Stunned by the amount of power, Vegeta stumbled back, wiping blood from his mouth. You'll pay. I'll kill you all in one blast. He screamed as he powered up for a final attack. Vegeta was quick to power up as well, still not sure if his new-found power was enough to finish the job. Vegeta released his attack as did Vegeta. The two powerful beams stretched from each of their palms and collided, each beam battling to overpower the other. Vegeta struggled to keep from being overtaken, but he saw Vegeto's beam slowly advancing on him, pushing his own attack back at him. Goku then appeared at Vegeta's side and released a Kamehameha in an effort to even out the power. Goku's added attack pushed Vegeto's beam back until the distance was in their favor, but still, it was not enough. That's when Trunks showed up and contributed his best attack. The three warriors gave it their all, and after a little bit of struggle, they finally overpowered Vegeta, much to his dismay. There was a bright flash and a muffled scream. Then, silence. Vegeta, Goku, Trunks and Bulma had all been knocked to the ground and it was a long time before any of them got up. Finally, Goku sat up, his ribs causing him a great deal of pain, and he looked around. Trunks was just sitting up too, and Bulma, but Vegeta didn't move. The three made their way over to him to see if he was alive. He's breathing. Bulma noted. Man, he's got a pretty bad-looking gash there. Goku said under his breath, not to worry Trunks and Bulma. After a few attempts to wake him up, Vegeta finally showed signs that he was waking up. Daddy, Trunks said softly. Are you awake? There was silence for a moment. No, Vegeta finally said without opening his eyes. Trunks laughed happily. Or so, later that night. Bulma tucked Trunks into bed after checking his injuries for the 100th time. Feeling okay? She asked him again. Yes. Trunks answered. Good night. Bulma said as she walked to the door. When can Daddy train me again? He called after her. She turned and looked at him. Not for a while. Let's let him sleep in tomorrow, okay? Trunks nodded and she closed the door. Bulma entered her bedroom and closed the door. She slowly made her way over to Vegeta, who was either asleep or unconscious in bed. She couldn't tell which. She changed and brushed her teeth before climbing into bed. After turning off the light, she turned onto her side. She gazed at Vegeta and the bandages he was wrapped in. She realized that Vegeta had finally shown some affection for the first time today. She knew he'd always be there with her and Trunks. She closed her eyes and smiled, certain this time. Vegeta loved them,